following year, we created Save Our Schools. And when we created Save Our Schools, Diane Ravitch came, Matt Damon came, 10,000 people came. We kept thinking that somehow they would listen, that somehow they would start paying attention to their data. I don't think they should be paying, the federal government shouldn't be paying attention to your child's data. They should be paying attention to their own data, and their data says they have failed and failed and failed consistently. It's not only that, they had another impact study that looked at reading across the curriculum, content area literacy. Again, they created 5 programs, and what they did was these 5 programs, they did package programs, they did one university base, they tried to be a little more selective this time, but in the end, they looked at 5th grade first, and they looked at those scores, the comprehension scores at the end of the 5th grade, and guess what? Once again, now they have an impact study that says that the 5th graders lost comprehension. No improvement. They did it again for the 6th grade, same thing, another impact study. Guess what? We don't do impact studies anymore. See, we've got to wonder what they're doing. So the data that counts and the data that really counts, well, the data that counts should be their data, and we should be asking them, where's the evidence that these reforms have been successful? Because I don't see it. Our 17-year-olds, we've got the data, the NAEP scores, 17-year-olds, we're flatlined. We have little or no improvement. After 1.2 trillion, and that's only the federal money, that's 10% of what we spend. The other 90%, guess what, comes from you people. It comes from local and state taxes, that's where it comes from, so we spend $10 trillion. And where we at, we have 17-year-olds that are here. We're told that we don't match up internationally. So I'm an educator, so I tell people, we're always pushed, do you have best practice? Are you research-based? Well, I say none of these reforms are best practice. None of them are research-based. Because, and they give us examples. They say, well, you know, Finland outscored us. And I say, well, Finland's a smaller country. It's kind of a different country than ours. But I say, all right, I'll give it to you. Let me research about Finland. What's different than Finland and the US? No child takes a standardized test until the age 16, and the only test they take is the one that does the international comparison. And they wound up #1 in literacy, and they outscore us. Every nation that's ahead of us does not assess the way we do. So I want to go back to another piece that when I walked to DC, what I did was I walked 10 miles a day. I'd walk in the morning, because I had to do this in August, because they told me I had to arrive. The American University of DC, you must arrive on Labor Day. It is a no-news day. People might notice you. That's the kind of things that we do. So I said, all right, I'll walk. And I walked in that hot weather. But each night, I met with teachers and parents, special ed teachers, bilingual teachers, reading teachers, all kinds of parents and students along the way. We have little walk-in man events. Sometimes there's 2 people, sometimes there's 3, sometimes there's 10, sometimes there's 50. One time there was 60, one time there was 100. One time there was me and one other person in Baltimore at the Poe room in the library. But we would have a conversation. It really wasn't about me walking. I wanted to know what was happening in their communities. And we discovered something. From Connecticut all the way to DC. That means we've got Connecticut, we've got New York, we have New Jersey, we have Pennsylvania, we have Delaware, we have Maryland, and we have DC. And I found something really interesting. When I'd ask those teachers, well, how much time are you spending teaching? Because it started coming up. I don't really have to ask it. They said, well, are you including the test prep? Or are you including the practice for the prep? I said, well, I think so. They said, are you including the actual testing time? I said, well, yeah, give it all to me. And then what did I start to hear? I started hearing parents not saying 4 days like we just had here. I started hearing people say, we're talking 4 weeks, we're talking 6 weeks, we're talking 8 weeks, we're talking 10 weeks, we're talking 12 weeks. It all depended on how stressed your district was with test scores over there. So we said, when I talked to my bilingual teachers, they said, I don't get to see my kids until almost November. Because all I do in the beginning, I have to test everyone. Same thing with my reading teachers, same thing with my special education teachers. They would turn around and say that, well, you know, kids are asking, when are we gonna start doing something? And what they've been doing is testing. along the way so they could get their baseline. So I could give you that concept, that what we're talking about is an abuse of assessment. When I go, on Saturday when I was in Portland, I gave the example, Steve Krashen from California, another literacy professor, likes to use this analogy. He says, Jesse, when you go to the doctor and he needs to test your blood, what's he do? And so I say, well, you know, he sticks a needle in my hand. He says, why does he take all your blood? And I said, oh, well, he doesn't need to. He says, well, you know what? They're taking all our blood when we're our kids. And then he looked at the gold bar. When you look at the international model for assessment and collecting data, and the model of the U.S. Department of Education uses the NAEP exam, and they use a sampling method. And what a sampling method works this way. It says that no child will be tested all the time. No child will be tested probably, if they're lucky, well, not lucky, but maybe twice in their time, and no child will sit for the whole test. They will break it up, so they'll look at who's my special ed, who's my poor, who's my middle class, who's my wealthy, who's my best, who's my brightest. They put the sampling method up together so that you get a cross sample. And with that sample, that's what we use internationally. And we're really assessing only about 500,000 kids. Now I know a little bit about NAEP testing because my daughter did the NAEP test. So my daughter's 24 now. I've been at this so long that when my daughter was in the 8th grade, she was at a conference that we had at Central that I put together called Children Are More Than a Test Score. And in the 8th grade, she was already speaking. And my daughter always did well on the assessments. But she said, my grade's too big for these little bubbles over there. And it was a great thing, and people talk about that. But I want to